Have you ever noticed that a single song can completely change your state? One moment you're tired, distracted, and unmotivated, then a particular piece of music starts playing and suddenly your energy rises, your focus sharpens, and your mood shifts almost instantly. Why does that happen? And more importantly, can we use music intentionally to improve learning, motivation, performance, and even long-term brain health? The answer is yes. And the science behind it is far more fascinating than most people realize. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Music is not simply entertainment. From a neuroscience perspective, music is one of the most powerful tools capable of influencing multiple brain systems simultaneously. Unlike many stimuli that activate only a specific brain region, music engages widespread neural networks involved in attention, emotion, movement, memory, reward, learning, and motivation. In other words, music acts almost like a direct interface with the nervous system, and that's why its effects can feel so immediate. When certain sounds, rhythms, melodies, and harmonies enter the brain, they influence neurotransmitters such as dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, and even endogenous opioids. These chemicals affect how energized you feel, how motivated you feel, how much effort you're willing to sustain, and how effectively you learn and remember information. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your brain as an orchestra. Every section needs to stay synchronized for peak performance. Attention, emotion, memory, movement, motivation, stress regulation. When these systems become disorganized, performance declines. You feel distracted, mentally fatigued, less motivated, less productive. Music can act like a conductor helping coordinate those systems. Not perfectly, not magically, but often remarkably effectively. What the research shows is that specific types of music can improve exercise performance, increase work output, enhance mood, reduce perceived effort during difficult tasks, and even improve aspects of learning and memory when used appropriately. But here's where many people get it wrong. They assume all music works the same way. It doesn't. The type of music that improves motivation may not be the same type that improves concentration. The music that helps learning may not be the music that enhances athletic performance, and some forms of music can actually reduce focus depending on the task. This is why understanding the underlying neuroscience becomes so valuable, because once you understand how music affects the brain, you can begin using it strategically rather than randomly. Over the next several sections, we'll explore how music influences dopamine and motivation, how rhythm affects movement and endurance, why certain sounds improve focus while others create distraction, and how music can become a practical tool for learning, productivity, emotional regulation, and overall mental performance. We'll also discuss science-based protocols you can begin using immediately. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post content like this every day focused on neuroscience, metabolism, performance, longevity, and science-based tools for optimizing health naturally. Because when you understand how the brain responds to music, you gain access to a powerful tool that has been influencing human behavior for thousands of years. Now let's explore one of the most fascinating aspects of music, its ability to increase motivation almost instantly. Because when most people think about motivation, they assume it's purely psychological. They think motivation comes from discipline, willpower, mindset, or personality. But neuroscience tells us something different. Motivation is heavily influenced by brain chemistry, and music is one of the fastest ways to influence that chemistry. Here's what's really going on inside your body. One of the key neurotransmitters involved in motivation is dopamine. Dopamine is often called the reward molecule, but that's actually an oversimplification. Dopamine is less about pleasure and more about pursuit. It helps drive action, effort, focus, goal-directed behavior, and anticipation of future rewards. When dopamine levels rise appropriately, you feel more energized to move toward a goal. You become more willing to exert effort. Tasks feel more engaging. Challenges seem more manageable. This is one reason music can have such profound effects on performance. Certain forms of music stimulate dopamine release within reward-related brain circuits. And importantly, the brain often releases dopamine before the most enjoyable part of the song arrives. The anticipation itself becomes rewarding. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine you're watching a great movie. Often the excitement doesn't come from knowing exactly what happens next. The excitement comes from anticipating what might happen next. Music works similarly. Your brain constantly predicts upcoming notes, rhythms, and musical patterns. When those predictions are met, or occasionally exceeded, the reward system becomes activated. The result is increased engagement and motivation. What the research shows is that music can increase activation in neural networks associated with reward, attention, movement, and emotional processing. This may help explain why people often perform better during exercise when listening to music they enjoy. Not because the workout becomes physically easier, but because the brain perceives the effort differently. Now let's discuss an important distinction. Not all motivating music is the same. The most effective motivational music tends to be highly individual. One person may feel energized by electronic music, another by orchestral music, another by rock, another by hip-hop. The specific genre often matters less than the emotional and physiological response it produces. In other words, the best motivational music is often the music that reliably changes your state. Now, here's something many people overlook. Music can become a conditioned neurological trigger. If you repeatedly listen to a specific playlist before workouts, deep work sessions, studying, or important tasks, the brain begins associating that music with performance. Over time, the music itself becomes a cue, a signal that it's time to focus, time to work, time to perform. Elite athletes frequently use this phenomenon intentionally, so do high-performing professionals. Now let's discuss a practical protocol. Create a dedicated performance playlist. Use it only during activities where you want maximum focus, energy, or effort. Avoid playing that same music casually throughout the day. The goal is to strengthen the neurological association. Over time, simply hearing the first few seconds of those songs can help shift your brain into a performance-oriented state. This is essentially behavioral conditioning applied through music. Now here's the key takeaway. Music isn't simply creating motivation. It's helping unlock motivational systems already present within the brain. And when used strategically, it can become one of the most effective tools for increasing energy, effort, and consistency. Now let's discuss something remarkable about the human brain. We are literally wired for rhythm. Long before recorded music existed, humans synchronized movement through rhythm: drumming, clapping, marching, dancing, chanting. For thousands of years, rhythm has helped coordinate human behavior. Modern neuroscience now helps explain why. Here's what's really going on inside your body. When you hear a steady beat, your auditory system doesn't work alone. It immediately begins communicating with motor regions of the brain, even if you're sitting completely still, even if you're not consciously paying attention. Brain imaging studies show that rhythmic sounds activate networks involved in movement planning and coordination. In simple terms, the brain naturally wants to synchronize with rhythm. This phenomenon is called entrainment. Entrainment occurs when biological systems synchronize with external patterns. Your heartbeat can entrain, your sleep-wake cycle can entrain, and remarkably, your movement patterns can entrain to music. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine you're rowing a boat. If every rower moves at a different pace, the boat becomes inefficient. Energy is wasted. Progress slows. But if everyone rows to the same rhythm, efficiency increases dramatically. Music often provides that rhythm for the nervous system. It helps coordinate movement timing and reduce unnecessary variability. The result is greater efficiency, and greater efficiency often means better endurance. What the research shows is that music can reduce perceived exertion during exercise. This is incredibly important because perceived exertion often determines how long we continue a task. Two workouts may be physiologically identical, but if one feels easier, you're more likely to sustain effort. Music appears capable of altering that perception, not by changing physical reality, but by changing how the brain interprets physical effort. This is one reason runners, cyclists, rowers, and endurance athletes frequently perform better with carefully selected music. The body may be working just as hard, but the experience feels more manageable. Now let's discuss cadence. Cadence simply refers to movement rhythm. Steps per minute, pedal revolutions, rowing strokes. Certain music tempos naturally support certain movement patterns. For example, moderate tempo music often works well for steady-state cardio. Higher tempo music may support intervals or intense efforts. The brain begins synchronizing movement patterns with the beat, and this synchronization can improve consistency. Now here's something fascinating. Music may also influence pain perception. During challenging exercise, the brain processes signals related to discomfort and fatigue. Certain forms of music appear to compete for attentional resources. In other words, part of the brain's attention shifts toward the music. Less attention becomes available for discomfort signals. The effort still exists, but the experience changes. This is one reason people often report that workouts feel shorter when accompanied by engaging music. Now let's discuss a practical protocol. Create separate playlists for different goals. One playlist for endurance training, one for high-intensity efforts, one for recovery walks, one for deep work. Your brain will gradually develop unique associations with each. Over time, those playlists become performance triggers. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post content like this every day focused on science-based tools for improving performance, health, focus, and longevity. Now, here's the key takeaway. Music doesn't simply entertain the brain during movement, it actively interacts with neural circuits responsible for coordination, effort perception, motivation, and endurance. And when used strategically, it can become a powerful performance-enhancing tool. Now, let's talk about one of the most misunderstood aspects of music, its relationship to learning and memory. Many people assume music automatically improves studying, but the neuroscience is more nuanced. Sometimes music enhances learning. Sometimes it interferes with learning. The difference depends on the task, the type of music, and how the brain processes information. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Learning requires the coordination of several brain systems: attention, working memory, pattern recognition, memory consolidation, and emotional engagement. When these systems work together efficiently, information is encoded more effectively. The challenge is that attention is a limited resource. The brain can only allocate so much processing power at a given moment. This means anything competing for attention has the potential to either help or hinder learning. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your brain is a classroom. The teacher represents the information you're trying to learn. Music can either act like helpful background lighting that improves the environment, or like another person talking in the room. The effect depends entirely on how demanding the music is. If the music constantly competes for attention, learning suffers. If the music supports a stable mental state without demanding attention, learning may improve. What the research shows is that instrumental music tends to be less disruptive during tasks involving language processing. Why? Because lyrics compete with language networks in the brain. If you're reading, writing, studying, or learning verbal information, music with lyrics often creates interference. Your brain is trying to process two streams of language simultaneously, one from the task, one from the music. The result can be reduced comprehension and retention. This is one reason many high performers prefer instrumental music while working, not because lyrics are bad, but because they consume attentional resources. Now let's discuss emotional learning. This is where music becomes particularly powerful. Emotion strengthens memory formation. Information attached to emotional experiences tends to be remembered more effectively. Music is one of the most reliable ways to influence emotional state. A meaningful song can instantly evoke memories from years or even decades earlier. This happens because music strongly interacts with brain regions involved in memory and emotion, including the hippocampus and limbic system. In practical terms, if you're trying to learn something important, creating a positive emotional state beforehand may improve retention. Music can help facilitate that state. Now, here's another fascinating finding. Certain forms of music appear capable of increasing sustained attention during repetitive or monotonous tasks, not because they make the task inherently more interesting, but because they help regulate arousal levels in the nervous system. Too little arousal leads to boredom. Too much arousal leads to distraction. The optimal learning state sits somewhere in the middle. Music can help move you toward that sweet spot. Now, let's discuss a practical protocol. For deep learning, use instrumental music, low distraction ambient music, classical music, or music specifically designed for concentration. Keep volume relatively low. The goal is environmental support, not stimulation. For memory review sessions, consider using the same music repeatedly. The brain often forms contextual associations. When you later hear that music again, it may help reactivate related memory networks. Now, here's the key takeaway. Music does not automatically improve learning, but when carefully selected, it can create an environment that supports attention, emotional engagement, and memory formation. And those factors are essential for effective learning. Now let's explore one of the most powerful and immediate effects of music, its ability to change your emotional state. Because while many people think of music primarily as entertainment, neuroscience suggests something much deeper. Music is one of the most effective tools available for regulating mood, reducing stress, and influencing emotional experience. And unlike many interventions, its effects can occur within minutes. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your emotional state is heavily influenced by the nervous system. Throughout the day, your brain continuously evaluates internal and external information. Work deadlines, relationships, financial pressures, physical fatigue, social interactions, all of these influence neural circuits involved in emotion. As a result, stress hormones fluctuate. Heart rate changes, breathing patterns shift, and mood rises or falls. Music has a unique ability to interact with these systems simultaneously. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your emotional state is like the climate inside a room. Stress, anxiety, and overwhelm gradually raise the temperature. Over time, the room becomes uncomfortable. Music can act like a thermostat. It doesn't eliminate every challenge in your life, but it can help regulate the internal environment in which those challenges are experienced. What the research shows is that music influences activity within brain regions involved in emotion, including the amygdala, hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, and reward networks. These regions help determine how we interpret experiences, process stress, and regulate mood. This is one reason a single song can suddenly make you feel calm, energized, nostalgic, hopeful, or emotionally connected. The brain isn't merely hearing the music, it's responding to it physiologically. Now let's discuss stress. When stress levels rise, the sympathetic nervous system becomes more active. Heart rate increases, muscle tension rises, attention narrows, the body prepares for action. While this response is useful in emergencies, chronic activation can become exhausting. Certain forms of music appear capable of increasing parasympathetic nervous system activity, the branch responsible for recovery, relaxation, and restoration. This shift often produces measurable reductions in perceived stress and anxiety. In simple terms, music can help move the nervous system from a state of threat toward a state of safety. Now, here's something fascinating. Music often provides emotional experiences that words alone cannot. The brain processes music differently than language. As a result, music can sometimes access emotional states that are difficult to describe verbally. This may help explain why music is frequently used in therapeutic settings, stress management programs, and emotional recovery protocols. Now let's discuss a practical strategy. Create what I call emotional state playlists. Rather than organizing music by genre, organize it by outcome. For example, a calm playlist, a focus playlist, a motivation playlist, a recovery playlist, a gratitude playlist, a workout playlist. This allows you to intentionally select music based on the state you want to create. Instead of asking, what do I feel like listening to? Ask, how do I want to feel? That's a very different question, and it transforms music into a deliberate performance tool. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post content like this every day focused on neuroscience, performance, longevity, and science-based tools for optimizing your mind and body. Now, here's the key takeaway. Music is not simply reflecting your emotional state. It can actively shape your emotional state. And when used strategically, it becomes a powerful tool for improving mood, reducing stress, increasing resilience, and supporting overall mental well-being. Now, let's bring everything together and discuss how to use music strategically throughout your day. Because the goal isn't simply to listen to more music. The goal is to use music as a tool that helps you access specific mental and physiological states when you need them most. Just as nutrition supports metabolism and exercise supports fitness, music can support attention, motivation, learning, emotional regulation, and recovery, but only when used intentionally. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Throughout the day, your brain moves through different states. Sometimes you need intense focus. Sometimes you need creativity. Sometimes you need motivation. Sometimes you need recovery. Each of these states involves different patterns of neural activity, different neurotransmitters, different levels of arousal, different cognitive demands. The mistake many people make is using the same type of music for everything. The brain doesn't work that way. Different goals require different neural environments, and music can help create those environments. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine you're driving a high-performance car. You wouldn't use the same gear for every situation. You use different gears depending on the terrain. Music works similarly. Different types of music serve different purposes. The key is matching the music to the outcome you're seeking. Let's begin with motivation. When you're preparing for a workout, challenging task, presentation, or demanding work session, select highly energizing music that reliably elevates your state. The specific genre matters less than the emotional response. The goal is increased dopamine, increased arousal, and increased willingness to exert effort. Next comes focus. For deep work, reading, studying, coding, writing, or analytical thinking, use music that minimizes distraction, instrumental tracks, ambient music, classical music, or repetitive low-lyric soundscapes. Remember, the brain processes language resources differently. Lyrics often compete with verbal tasks. For learning and memory, consistency becomes valuable. Using similar background music during study sessions can create contextual cues that strengthen memory retrieval later. The brain often associates information with environmental context. Music becomes part of that context. Now let's discuss emotional regulation. Many people wait until stress becomes overwhelming before taking action. Instead, use music proactively. When stress begins rising, intentionally shift your nervous system. Slow tempo music often encourages slower breathing patterns and increased parasympathetic activity. This helps create a physiological environment associated with recovery and calmness. Now let's talk about recovery. One of the most overlooked applications of music is post-performance recovery. After intense exercise, demanding work, or emotionally challenging situations, calming music can help signal to the nervous system that effort is complete. Recovery can begin. This transition is critical because performance without recovery eventually leads to burnout. Now here's a practical daily protocol. Morning, use energizing music to increase alertness and motivation. Deep work, use instrumental or low distraction music. Exercise, use rhythmically engaging music matched to activity intensity. Evening, use slower, calming music to encourage relaxation and recovery. Sleep preparation, reduce stimulation and choose relaxing sound environments if desired. Now here's the key takeaway. Music becomes most powerful when it stops being random and starts becoming intentional. Instead of allowing music to simply accompany your day, allow it to shape your day. Because when used strategically, music becomes more than entertainment. It becomes a neuroscience-based tool for improving motivation, mood, learning, performance, and overall well-being. As we wrap up, let's return to a simple but powerful idea. Music is not just something you hear, it's something your brain experiences. And when you understand the neuroscience behind it, music becomes far more than entertainment. It becomes a tool for shaping attention, a tool for influencing motivation, a tool for improving learning, a tool for regulating emotion, and a tool for enhancing performance in both the brain and the body. Today, we've explored how music influences dopamine, the neurotransmitter heavily involved in motivation, effort, and goal-directed behavior. We learned that the right music can help activate neural circuits associated with reward and anticipation, making difficult tasks feel more engaging and increasing the likelihood that you'll sustain effort over time. We also discussed rhythm and movement. The human brain is naturally designed to synchronize with rhythmic patterns. This is one reason music can improve exercise performance, reduce perceived exertion, and help support endurance during physically demanding activities. Next, we explored learning and memory. Not all music improves learning, but when selected carefully, especially instrumental or low distraction music, it can help create an environment that supports concentration, attention, and memory formation. We then examined one of music's most powerful effects, emotional regulation. Music can influence stress levels, mood, nervous system activity, and emotional resilience. In many cases, it can shift your state within minutes. And finally, we discussed practical protocols, using specific playlists for motivation, different music for deep work, recovery-focused music for stress reduction, and intentional listening strategies that align with your goals throughout the day. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Every time you listen to music, your brain is making predictions, releasing neurotransmitters, coordinating networks involved in emotion, movement, memory, and attention. The question is whether you're using those effects intentionally. So here's your challenge. Over the next 7 days, create 3 playlists, one for focus, one for motivation, and one for recovery. Use them consistently for their specific purpose. Track your energy, track your concentration, track your mood, and notice how your performance changes. Because small adjustments in brain state often produce surprisingly large changes in behavior. Remember, the goal isn't to listen to more music. The goal is to use music more intelligently. When applied strategically, music can become one of the simplest, safest, and most enjoyable neuroscience-based tools available for improving learning, motivation, mood, performance, and overall quality of life. If this video added value, like the video and subscribe to join thousands of others using science-based tools to optimize their health, focus, energy, and longevity naturally. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.